everyone. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. It's so good to see all of you here. I am so excited about this Bible study. It'll be a 7-week Bible study in 1 John, the New Testament book of 1 John. So we have a lot to cover. And just a little bit of background about this Bible study. So as you all know, I know Pastor Bob talked a little bit about this past Sunday in church, but I am what's called a provisional elder in the United Methodist Church. So what does that mean, provisional elder? Well, how I like to explain it, in the United Methodist Church, the ordination process is very extensive. And it takes about 8 years to get fully ordained. So right now I'm commissioned, and that basically means I liken it to being in residency, like for med school. So this is a period of time, at least 2 years, where I am growing as a pastor, learning how to do ministry, learning how to navigate church conflict, all that fun stuff. So, and part of being provisional elder, I have to apply for full connection, and that process is very extensive. So I have to write about 100 pages of paperwork, I have to fill out a bunch of forms, and I have to write a Bible study. So it has to be on a book in the Bible, any book of my choosing. And so I have chosen 1 John. Come on in, Margaret. So I have chosen 1 John to write my Bible study. So you might be wondering why 1 John, right? I could have picked any book in the whole Bible. Well, first, we were just in Ecclesiastes for about eight weeks, and that book is a hard book, and it's a little depressing. All right, so it has a wonderful message, but I wanted to pick something, since we just did Old Testament to do in the New Testament, and I wanted something to be a bit more uplifting, but more importantly, I love the Gospel of John. It's my favorite gospel out of the 4. So you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called what's known as the Synoptic Gospels. So they're called that because they're all very similar to one another, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And John is kind of like the black sheep in the family, right? We could spend the next 30 minutes talking about why the Gospel of John is different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But the major reason why John is different is because of John's writing and really how he approaches his theology. So he's really trying to answer the question why. Why do we believe the things that we believe? And he's also trying to, he's really talking a lot about orthodoxy, so correct doctrine, right? Who is Jesus? Why did he come? What was his purpose here on earth? So he's really trying to answer the why. And his writing is very simplistic, which I appreciate, but so beautiful at the same time. So I knew I liked the writings of John. So John also wrote the epistles of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd will be in 1st. He also wrote the Revelation, the last book in the Bible, Revelation of John the Apostle. And the Gospel of John, that would have been a very long study, right? And I had to write the study. So I did not want to try to tackle that. So 1 John came into my mind because of that reason, and also my husband Chris and I, we had a passage from 1 John 4, verses 7 through 16, so the famous passage of God is love, and we love others because God first loved us, and Jesus is in us, and we can love others because Christ reigns in us. And I can't say I ever really dove extensively into 1 John. Like I've read it, but never really studied it extensively. So it is a beautiful book, 5 chapters. Trust me, there is a lot to talk about in the next 7 weeks, and that's just a little bit about why I chose 1 John. A little bit about me. I think everyone in the room knows me pretty well, but I am Pastor Margaret Rountree. I'm the associate minister here. This is my 3rd Bible study I've led here. We did James, Ecclesiastes, and now 1 John. So this Bible study, I really like Bible studies where there's free-flowing discussion. So I do not like Bible studies where I'm sitting up here lecturing for an hour. If you want to hear a sermon, please come Sunday morning. Now tonight will look a little bit different than our remaining sessions together because I will be doing most of the talking tonight. I'll be providing a brief overview of 1 John, or we'll review things like the date, the authorship, the recipients, the genre, historical background. We'll go over an outline of 1 John. We will watch a short, great overview of 1 John. So tonight I will be doing a lot of the talking, but I always like to start off every session to tell people this class is going to be as fruitful as you make it, so please do your homework. It's a commitment, and I've tried to not have a ton of homework. Our James Bible study, for those of you who are in that study, was a lot of work. We picked a study that was a lot of homework. But again, I've written this study, so I provided you with all the questions. And you notice too, I'm still working on the remaining last 3 weeks. So I'll provide those to you all when I'm finished with that. But the questions each week, they vary from about 8 to 10 questions, and some questions have multiple parts. But it's important that you answer those questions before you come to class, so that when we are in class, we can have fruitful discussions, and it's not painful with me trying to facilitate discussion. If people haven't done their homework, it just doesn't work, and then I'll be up here just me talking. Part of being in a Bible study, a lot of it is about being in community, about getting to know one another. We all experience God in unique ways, and we all read scripture with different lenses, and I always think it's very helpful and fruitful to hear from folks from different stages of life, from different life experiences, different cultural backgrounds, etc. So that'll kind of be how we do each session, discussion-based Bible study, not a lecture-based. So if that's something you find yourself not liking, then that's okay. We have other classes on Wednesday night you can try out, but that'll be how we do Bible study for the next 7 weeks. So before we begin here, I would like for everyone to introduce themselves, because we have some new faces in here, and it's important to get to know one another. We're in the same room for an hour, locked in the same room, so. So we'll go around the room and just say who you are, perhaps what you were looking forward to learning about in 1 John, what you were interested in learning about. And lastly, the third thing, I want everyone to say, I want everyone to talk about the coolest place they've been to. All right? The coolest place they've been to or traveled to. So anyone is welcome to start, and we'll just go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Temperature cool or cool?
Answer that question anywhere you want.
Well, I can start by saying both, because Alaska. Oh, that's the third thing, sorry. I'm Joan Schottler, and I've taken, I think, all of Pastor Margaret's classes, and I do learn lots, and not just from her, but from all of the people in the class. And it's what I love about the group is that it's so varied. It's from the 8 o'clock service to 9:30 and the 12 or 11 whenever they meet. And my favorite cool place was Alaska. I took a 7-day cruise and then a 7-day land trip, and I'm not much of a traveler usually, but it was fabulous.
Wow.
Please speak up.
Please speak up.
Everybody,
We will try our best.
I have a problem.
I do too. I should know that, Julia. Sorry.
I'll go. I'm Kristen Epstein, and I did Bible studies for years. I did BSF and went back teaching and was not able to attend that, but I'm very excited to be able to be in a Bible study again. I have not done the book of 1 John, so that will be fun to do. And the coolest place I've ever been was Maui, Hawaii.
Wow.
We went through bamboo forests, and we swam in waterfalls, and we swam in waves and coolest place ever. We wanna go back again this summer, so.
The hot
yeah.
Alaska.
It's what?
The hot Alaska.
The hot Alaska,
Yeah.
yes, it was wonderful, yeah. Margaret Abbey, and, been a member of this church for about 30 years. I, do attend regularly for about 30 years, a Sunday morning class, and I came and joined Ecclesiastes this last time, and I really enjoyed the mix of people and how much I learned and how much I was able to think about even leading this class. The study really helped me. I really enjoyed it. The coolest place I've ever been is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks, Margaret.
Mary Ann Carroll. I won't say how long I've been a member of the church. A long time. Nancy too. I was in the Ecclesiastes study, and that was interesting.
Yes.
I can't say I learned a lot, but I can't say it was fun.
No.
But,
So we laughed a lot.
We did.
and the coolest place I think I have ever been was Ephesus. And that was really neat to see where, especially I think at the end of his life and or her life, John took Mary there, and they had she had a house there where she lived, and so that was a really cool place to be.
So cool. And so we'll see John is writing to the churches in and around Ephesus in 1 John, so that'll help you visualize some things.
Hi, I'm Nancy Thomas. Like Mary Ann, I've been in this church all my life, several generations, and I love this place. I, like Mary Ann, I'm so glad we studied Ecclesiastes with the group of people we did, and with this, Pastor Margaret teaching it, because it's a difficult book, and it's not the most cheerful book in the Bible, but I'm glad I did it in a group to help me understand it. The coolest place, I love the world, and Steve and I traveled the world, but definitely the coolest place is in cold is, we thought Antarctica was fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Hi, I'm Susan Mclean. I've been in this church, my children, when they were young, brought me here. They're responsible for me being here. Thank heavens. And it was the best thing I ever did, and I love it. What am I supposed to talk about? What's the cool place?
Yes.
Oh, I have been in a Bible study on Wednesday mornings, probably for, 10 or 12 years. And that is, it had not been offered, so I decided I would just come on Wednesday night. So here I am.
Yay.
And also, the coolest place I've been, I have been to Alaska, but place I just love, because I love nature. We did the fjords of Norway, and they were just outstanding. They're breathtaking.
Glad to have you, Susan. Other Susan.
Susan Johnson Clayton, and I have been a member for a year, and then I was away for 5 years, and before that I had been a member about 10 years. So, but I'm back, and so I'm very happy to be back. And I've enjoyed the Ecclesiastes and the James Bible studies. I don't know that much about 1 John. I think I had some kind of study on it when I was really much younger, like just out of college or something, but not too much exposure recently, and I'm sure it's going to be great. I really enjoyed the varied members of the group. And I don't travel much, so one place I have gone that was absolutely better than I expected was Savannah, Georgia. So I just really like that.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm Judy Ryan. I've been a member for 37 years, and I think, I think someone mentioned they needed a Bible study on Sunday morning, becomers class at 11. In the room right across, left of the stage, please come, we're doing Philippians. We're on the first chapter for 3 weeks now, because we have so much conversation and discussion. So if you don't get to talk here, you get to talk in our class. Anyway, I have taken all 3 of the pastor's classes, and I told someone the other day, I think that my Bible knowledge has grown exponentially, just in, what I'm doing in our Sunday school class and in here. I'm amazed at how much I'm learning, and I just really love it. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Glad to hear.
I've been at several places all over the country, the Grand Canyon and Petrified Forest and Mount Rushmore. They're all fantastic places, but my coolest place is gonna be next year, and that's gonna be England.
Oh my goodness.
And that'd be great.
Very exciting. Cool. Thank you, Judy.
My name's Linda Balkenbush. I'm here because Judy mentioned it and some other people have mentioned what a great class this is. I always feel inspired and uplifted whenever Margaret preaches in church. I love that it's a young woman's perspective, and then there's some scholarship and a different perspective. So I'm excited for that. And I've been a regular visitor for about a year. I haven't joined yet, but I'm just checking out all kinds of different classes and groups to figure out where I fit in best.
She fits in our Sunday school best.
Oh, I was just thinking, Mom, I'm talking to her around.
I do have to say, there's a family tie with the
I know, but that doesn't
Pearsons.
matter.
Her father is one of the dearest people in my family's life. We go back to infancy and my childhood church, and they're just beautiful memories of her dad and her family. So strong connection there. The coolest place I've probably ever been is on a 6-week backpacking trip through the mountaintops of Colorado.
Wow. 6 weeks.
Yes, we did my tent.
By herself.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow, that's
Wow.
I'm very proud. Are you on a specific trail like this?
We'll talk later. I'll give you all my secrets.
Thank you, Linda.
My name is Ann Ziviter, and I've been a member of this church for 12 years. And took a Bible study class, actually all the Bible studies, every spring, every fall, with Leslie Marsh. And they were so much fun. I mean, I learned so much and enjoyed that. And let's see, the coolest place I've ever been. I would have to say the Holy Lands and Ephesus and Patmos, were really amazing to me, because this is one of the reasons why I was so hungry for 1 John, because it was just amazing to go to Patmos and to go into that cave where John was, and you could, I have quite an imagination. So, to be in that cave, and of course there were no lights in there, no artificial lighting. And John was there, naturally, and just to imagine the things that those visions, and receiving, God's grace, and it's quite a hike up there. We took a bus. But it's way, way up, and it's isolated, but it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous at the top of this mountain, and you look out and you can see the Aegean Sea, and it was amazing. So, and I took a class to Seas last spring with Margaret, and yes, it was a tough one, but it makes you really think. So, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, to explore and to have, different ages and just a variety of different people here to get different input,
everyone has a different, description of what they're learning. So it's interesting to have all these different thoughts.
Thanks, Ann.
I'm Sheila Ralph. I've been in this church since 1978, and I just subtracted it from 2022, and I found that it was 44 years. I was in the Ecclesiastes Bible study also, and it really it was depressing. I'll be very honest. To me, it was depressing, and it was at a time in my life that I was going through my age, you know, and it made me look at things in a different way. It really did. It made me think. And I'm looking forward to this one. And as far as places that I've been, I can say I've been to this place and I've been to that place, and all of them are my most exciting trips because I've just enjoyed all of them. But I really do believe the one that stands out the most is Egypt. It just was phenomenal being there and seeing things that were so old and that they were still there. And I'm just in awe.
I'll never forget you on the camel.
But that and the Holy Land have been probably my most favorite trips.
All right, thank you, Sheila.
I have to say that, yeah, I rode a camel. I don't know what I'm gonna do next. I'm Chris Fairhall. Glad I gave you all a little smile. With a little luck and in 3 or 4 weeks, I hope to become a member here. There's a class and so forth. Yeah, certainly enjoying my time in this church. And then, let's see, so the best trip or the best place, this will be the weirdest, okay? It's the gym at Salisbury University about maybe 12 or 13, 14 years ago. And there's something called the Seagull Century. Any cyclists here?
Oh, yeah.
Ah, okay. It's basically you have 6,000 of your closest friends who are cyclists, and it's a remarkable event. But that particular one that I'm thinking of, it was the first time that I actually completed it in faster than 20 miles an hour.
Wow.
So that's why it's my favorite place.
Very awesome. Thank you, Chris.
I'm Ken Singleton. When Dave and Kendra retired from the Air Force about 8 years ago, they bought a 38-foot catamaran and moored it in St. Pete, and they found St. Pete first, and we've been coming with them since. We joined the choir. We enjoyed Ecclesiastes, and we thought we'd enjoy this Bible study too. I guess one of the coolest places would be a glacier in Alaska.
Which glacier?
The big one.
The big one. That one, gotcha.
It's the one that when you go to Alaska, they take one day that they just go up and down and around in this one area called something, I don't know. But there's a glacier right across the way, and you're looking at it from all these perspectives and everything. And I came away from that experience, it went on all day, thinking that if you ever want to see God, that's a kind of place to see it, because you couldn't look at all that you were seeing and not just that. So we've been in this church about 7 or 8 years. Like you said, when the kids got out of the military, they stayed here, so we came. And it has been a blessing to us because we're finally all as a family in the same church again after 20 years of moving around. That means a lot to us to have them with us, for us to be with them. We go every Sunday after church and have lunch together.
we live up in Clearwater, so we don't see them much during the week, but that Sunday's been special. We also all sing in the choir, so that's special to us too. Forget what else I was supposed to say.
Your name?
No, your last one. I'm Cindy. I'm the one here. And we've been married 57 years.
Oh,
wow. We think it's gonna work.
Yeah.
congratulations.
I'm done.
Well, I'm Julia Bond, and as I look around, I think I'm the youngest one here. I've been in this church 10 years now. Moved over here from the other coast, and I've loved it. I've loved it. This church reminds me of when I grew up in, with the balcony and the wood, dark wood. It was a very good mood, and I love this church as well. The coolest place I've been, well, about 3 years we lived on St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, and that was an education. And it was a good mood. But my daughter, who is I guess she was, a teacher in DODS, which is the Department of Defense, she taught our American kids on different bases. And the last place she was, well, she's in Italy now, but she was in Turkey. And I got to go to Turkey, which was a neat place to be. Our world is a neat place to be.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
I'm Kay Mays. I have also been in the church for 10 years, so we joined around the same time, I guess. I've been in multiple Bible study classes, the last one being Ecclesiastes. I too have traveled with Anne to both Israel and the Greek Isles and Rome, and she mentioned the big hill walking up to the cave. I remember the steep steps going down into the cave, and my partner did not go because of the steep, Martha didn't go because of the steep steps. We also went into the catacombs. Remember the catacombs in Italy?
I forgot about those.
And got baptized again at the River Jordan. And one other thing, I've had a lot of interesting trips, but I too went to Alaska, and we took a helicopter ride up to the dog sled, and actually went on dog sled ride. That was very interesting. So, and it's been a lot of fun being with all of you in various and sundry classes and church services. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Kay.
I'm Steve Ripley. Better half Cindy and I have been members for about 40 years. I can't say enough about the church and the kindergarten and the school programs for the youth, to lay the roots, to learn about the Lord. I've been in Bible Study Fellowship for 24 years, and the coolest place that I've been is Colorado Springs. About 39 years ago, it was 22 degrees below. But the coolest place that I've been was when I was in the Army. I went in the mountains of Switzerland, and if you've seen The Sound of Music, I mean, when she's up on the mountains, you know, I saw every bit of that. But also, to complement Susan's comment, fjords of Norway are hard to beat. Second to that, I highly recommend, British Columbia and
Yes.
the passage, ship travel to Alaska. I can't really say anything more. I think Margaret perfectly depicted the study of Ecclesiastes. I just wish that I had known that she had a prior study of James. I would have loved, to have been under your study for that. And really look forward to 1 John. I don't know that I've ever studied 1 John, but certainly have studied John several times, and it too is one of my favorite books. And if I were to refer somebody new, to the Bible, I think that would maybe be my first start. What I would, like to do is to continue to be spiritually receptive to the Lord and to continually learn. I had a man in my Bible study class last year. He was a neighbor, and I had recommended him, about our Bible study program several times, and he was driving by and Cindy and I just happened to be on the driveway, and he said, that Bible study program you were talking to me about? And I said, yeah. He said, I think I'd like to go to that. Well, here's an 83-year-old man that for 6 weeks attended Bible study fellowship with us, and we were studying the book of Matthew last year. And come to learn that this man was, very worldly. He'd been in the Air Force, had his own business, he's a very humble man, and for 15 years he taught Sunday school. And he was only with us, for 6 weeks, because he had a massive heart attack and passed away. But here was a man, a worldly man, a man's man, who had taught Sunday school for 15 years. He and his wife, very devout Christians, and he was still, spiritually receptive. At 83 years of age, he helped a man half his age that had the same problem that he had at one point in time. The young man had asked, us to pray for him in regard to a business issue that he had, and after he got through, right across from him, here's this 83-year-old man telling him that he had this same problem and how he handled it. So I'm looking to continue to be spiritually receptive and certainly look forward, to this.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Cindy Ripley. I've been here just as long as he has. But I did grow up in this church, actually. I think the coolest places that we have been together that I really enjoyed was the Maritimes of Canada. And if you've never seen the tidal changes at the Bay of Fundy, it is really something to see. It's not just 2 feet, it's like 45 feet. So, and we just really like Canada, and we've been to Vancouver Island. And I had the best Dungeness crab hash. Anyway, that's my story.
Thank you, Ripley. Caroline, you want to go?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Caroline Feaster, and I've been in this church about 35 years. And the second thing was why Bible school? A lot had to do, well, Susan was the first one that told me how much she enjoyed your Bible study. So that was piqued my interest. And then, like Linda said, your sermons I always learn from, and I don't know, I'm kind of intrigued that somebody your age, where you are spiritually and how I can learn from you, and it just kind of reopens my mind as we can learn from all our different age groups. And I always look forward to your sermons, so I thought it was exciting, especially when I heard that you were going to write this. So that was it. And then the other thing is, especially over these last couple of years of COVID, just realizing how, you started asking the question, well, why do I go to church? Because for a while you're sitting at home, and then you come back, and a lot of your friends are still sitting at home, and so kind of evaluated like, well, well, why do I go, you know? And how important community is, and I want to take as much advantage of this fabulous community we have in this church that I came to. And coolest places, all of them sound so great. And I do love to travel, and I've been to a lot of them, and there's so many beautiful places in this world where we see God. It's amazing that we get to live here and enjoy that. My holy ground is the camp in Leesburg, so it's hard for me to be, you know, it's hot, sweaty, and mosquito-y, but I love the camp in Leesburg, so that's where I accepted Christ as a teenager, and it just means the world to me.
I'm Karen Taggart. I've been here 20 years. I am a member of the choir. 2 days ago was my 1 year anniversary of the choir. I'm a greeter of Iceland, and I just finished my first month as Alder Guild in August. So getting very active.
Yes, you are.
Yay. I totally enjoyed all of Margaret's classes. I did a few Zoom classes previous to that. It's so much different being here personally with everybody. It's much different. And I'm excited for your own. Coolest places. I've been married 51 years, and our wedding trip was 6 months after we got married. And we did England, France, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, and Germany.
Wow.
And Holland in 2 weeks. It was an American Express trip. Really express. So we would get a touch of everything and go back someday to the places we liked, which we never did. But my best trip ever was a mission trip to China.
Wow.
And while I was there, it's still hard to talk about, Tiananmen Square happened. And our group was about 2 weeks ahead of it. We had already been there, but it was very scary. But an awesome trip.
Wow.
So,
Thank you.
I'm Iselene Foster. I've been with the church for 24 years and attended multiple Bible studies. And I was with James' class and Ecclesiastes, and I'm looking forward for 1 John. I like Bible studies because, you know, the Bible is such a hard book. And I like to hear other people, you know, views of the Bible. And I'm so happy to be here again with you all. And looking forward for 1 John. My coolest place that I've been is Italy. What a beautiful country. And I'm looking forward to going back. Yes. And that's it.
Thank you. My name is Laura Labby. I'm actually a parishioner at St. Thomas, but thank you all for having me to Bible study. I did the Ecclesiastes study with Pastor Margaret, and probably one of the few who could relate to Solomon. Everyone else is like, he's such a downer, but and the coolest place I've been is probably Switzerland. Welcome back, Laura. Thank you.
I'm Nancy Fallis, and I've been coming to this church over 30 years. I originally started coming when my mother-in-law we'd come down to visit, and we would come in with her, and then we moved down here 32 years ago. So we've been here ever since, and I love it. I'm involved with the United Methodist Women, and I try to stay very active with that. And I've never taken a Bible study class in quite a while, so I thought I need to get involved in it. And so I'm here tonight. And the coolest place, my husband and I traveled. With his work, he traveled a lot, so I packed my suitcase and went with him every chance I had. And we were in Europe, but I think my favorite spot is Maui.
Yes.
I'm Jackie Manning, and I'm fairly new to the church and new to St. Petersburg. We've been here 3 years, just right in time for COVID to start. So then they had to sort of back off when you're trying to meet people. You back off. So I have not had any classes here, but trying to get more involved. And the travel at the top of my list was Africa on a safari, and we would go in the wilds on foot too. So that was pretty neat to be right in the midst of the animals.
Wow. How weird. I went, but I never went on foot.
We had a garden in front and a garden back too, but we would hike through the wilds.
That's interesting.
You're brave. Well, that was 20 years ago.
All right, last but certainly not least.
My name is Beverly Hall. I moved here in 2006 and joined the church in 2007. I am a product of Leslie Marsh's daytime classes, and COVID squashed all of that. So I just decided that I'd try an evening class with a friend of Ann Civitar's. She spoke very highly of you, so I just want to continue my studies. The coldest place I ever lived, or was, I actually lived there, was Great Falls, Montana. And it was 42 degrees below zero. But the Glacier National Park, which is just about an hour where we used to live, it's gorgeous. It's not a very big park, but it's definitely worth going to see.
We were there this summer, we wanna go back.
It's very beautiful.
Well, thank you everyone for the introductions. We're gonna have to get through a lot of material in about 15 minutes, so we're gonna jump right ahead. So if you could jump to page 2 in your packets. All right, so this is what we'll go over here. This is what we'll go over here today. If we can't finish it, then please read through it. And we're not gonna have time to watch this Bible study project video, but all you gotta do is go on YouTube and Google 1 John Bible Study Project. It's a fabulous video. So if you wanna do that sometime in the next week, it just really helps to solidify everything into a 10-minute video. Really good visual for everyone. All right, so author.
No, YouTube.
YouTube.
Okay.
YouTube. All right, so author. Who wrote 1 John? Already talked about this a little bit, but it is thought, right? It is thought that the author of 1 John is the same author of the Gospel of John. So 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, all 3 epistles, all 3 letters, the author never identifies himself. In 2nd and 3rd John, he identifies himself as the elder, but that's the best we get from identification from the author. However, there's a lot of evidence, which we'll go through, of why scholars think the gospel writer John is the same writer of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. So, number 1, tradition. All right, so a number of early church leaders attributed this letter to John. Right, so we have agreement there from the early church leaders that the gospel writer John did write 1 John. So that's the first piece of evidence there. Second is epistolary hints that the author describes himself not merely as one of many eyewitnesses observing Jesus from a distance, but as one who had a quite intimate and personal experience with Jesus, right? So he knew him firsthand. So that's the second piece of evidence. All right. So John, the author, he was a pastor and an evangelist. Evangelist. Sorry, I can't talk today. Evangelist. There you go. Evangelist. So the Gospel book of John is very. John writes that book from a very converting basis. So what I mean by that is he's evangelizing, right, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he's doing the same thing in 1 John here. He's wanting to convert people to Christianity. So he is one of the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. He's believed to be, again, the author of the Gospel of John, the 3 epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. He also played a huge role in the early church in Jerusalem. All right? He has an older brother, James, not the same James who wrote the book of James, all right? The James who wrote the book of James is thought to be the half-brother of Jesus. Okay, so different James here. James was another disciple of Jesus. And John's mother, Salome, was among the first woman who ministered to the circle of the 12 disciples. So he's got that strong female role model in his life. All right, so that's just a little bit about John, the author of 1 John. Date and place, where was this letter written and at what point in human history? Again, it was likely composed in the city of Ephesus. So I know Mary Ann and Anne mentioned Ephesus. All right. So it was most likely composed in the city of Ephesus around AD 90 to 95. So AD, what that means there, 90 to 95 means 90 years to 95 years after the birth of Jesus, all right? So that's the time the letter was written. And according to early church tradition, as an old man, John served in the church in the city of Ephesus, okay? So as you can see on that map right there, I'm a very visual person, so it helps me to visualize again that's why it's so cool visiting the Holy Land. I've never been. I'm looking forward to one day going, but it provides us with a better visual when we're reading scripture. Like these are actual places in the world, and we can get a better picture of what's going on. But so you can see on this map where Ephesus is, right? You see it right there. All right. So the recipients, who was John writing to in 1 John? So the very last verse in the letter is verse 21 in chapter 5. And John writes this. He says, guard yourselves from idols. Guard yourselves from idols. So this warning in the final chapter of 1 John suggests that John was not sending this letter to Jewish people, but rather he was sending this letter to the Gentiles, right, who resided not in Israel, but on heathen or pagan soil, such as Ephesus. All right, and we'll get into a little bit more of paganism here in just a minute about the historical background of this letter and how that played into John's writing. So it's a little bit different of a letter. It doesn't really follow the exact outline of a letter, and we'll see later on that the genre actually is a poetic sermon. Technically it is a letter, but even more so a poetic sermon. John's taking a lot of his ideas that we find in chapters 13 through 17 in the Gospel of John, and he's expounding on those ideas from the Gospel. So what he's going to do, he's going to take like 4 or 5 major ideas, and he is going to repeatedly talk about these ideas and a cyclical nature. So those of you who have attended Ecclesiastes, that writing was very cyclical in nature, just all over the place. He's not very linear, or he doesn't really have a logical structure, but rather he's just going to talk about this subject, then he's going to talk about this subject, then he might go back and talk about this subject, but from a different point of view. So in writing, this is called amplification. Amplification. John's going to use a lot of hyperbole, all right? He's going to use a lot of stark contrast with simple images. This is one of the many reasons I love John's writing. Sometimes the Bible can be very complicated, and for me at least, I think John is very simplistic in his writing. It's easier to understand. And he's going to use in these stark images, he's going to use things like darkness and light, good and evil, right? These images that we have a clear picture of in our minds. All right, so that is the genre, a poetic sermon. Now a bit about the historical background, where we find ourselves in human history in 1 John. So in chapter 2, verse 26, John is going to inform everyone why he is writing this letter. So he says this in verse 26 of chapter 2. He says, "These things I have written to you concerning those who are trying to deceive you." So don't forget, he is not primarily writing to the Jewish people, right, who already know about Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He is writing to the Gentiles, all right? And he's writing to those pagan people that don't know Jesus, right? And they're rejecting him in some type of way. So Gnosticism, what in the world is Gnosticism? All right, we could spend a long time talking about Gnosticism, but essentially Gnosticism's basic premise saw a sharp dualism between the spirit and the matter, all right, between the spiritual and the physical. So the spiritual realm was regarded as divine or completely good, and the materialistic realm or the physical realm was regarded as created not by God, by humanity, and was thus evil. So this Gnostic premise harmfully touched two areas of Christianity. So those two areas of Christianity it harmfully touched are what we call orthodoxy. So correct doctrine. And what I mean by doctrine is really what are the central pillars of the Christian faith? What do we believe? So orthodoxy, that's the formal kind of theological name for that. And also orthopraxy, which is correct conduct. How are we supposed to be living this life as Christians, as believers in Jesus Christ? So orthodoxy and orthopraxy. So in regards to orthodoxy or correct doctrine, what do we believe as Christians? Gnosticism denied the incarnation of Jesus Christ. Because a pure spirit like God, right, this divine being, could not have anything to do with evil matter, like a human body, right? We all know our bodies are evil. They are very evil to us sometimes. Right, so they did not believe in the incarnation because in their minds, the two couldn't align with one another. So they offer two possible solutions to this problem, to the problem of the incarnation. The first is what we call Dostetic Gnostics, which they denied Jesus' humanity. Okay, so he only seemed to be a human being. He wasn't actually a human being according to Dostetic Gnostics, but only seemed to be a human being. This was their attempt to try to preserve Christ's deity at the expense of his humanity. So that is what we call Dostetic Gnostics. Next, we have a second group of Gnostics called Cerinthian Gnostics. And this group of people maintain that the early Jesus was nothing more than a human being, right? That he was just a human, that he was not God, right? So they were saving his humanity at the expense of his deity. And how they reconcile this was the heavenly Christ or the Logos, right? In John 1:1 we read that the Word was God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God and was God. So the Logos or Christ descended on Christ's baptism, but then left Jesus prior to his death on the cross. So this is how they reconciled or explained how he preserved his humanity at the expense of his deity. So both sects of Gnostics, obviously you can see how they're doing harmful work as far as correct doctrine or orthodoxy. So then there is the orthopraxy problem, or how are the Gnostics or the pagans doing harmful work in the Christian faith as far as orthopraxy? Well, they had a faulty sense of both sin and moral behavior. So some Gnostics claimed that they had not sinned ever. John writes about this in chapter 1, verse 10, while other Gnostics said we have no sin nature at all. Right? Both of these thought processes are completely wrong as far as correct doctrine. Right? We've all have fallen short of the glory of God. We are all sinners. So according to these Gnostics, sin was a matter of the evil flesh. Again, it was a matter of being in the human body, from which they had supposedly been liberated. So sin was not a matter affecting the noble spirit, right? Again, you have that separation of spirit and flesh. and their knowledge had allegedly brought them to this spirit level. So they had escaped the physical and entered the spirit level. So moral conduct was an unnecessary issue to them. Again, we do not believe this as Christians. This is not correct orthopraxy or correct conduct. So that's a little bit about the historical background of 1 John, why John is writing to these churches, these house churches primarily, in and around the city of Ephesus. A lot of these pagans or these Gnostics lived and presided in Ephesus, in and around Ephesus, and John thought it was his moral duty and obligation, again, to preach about correct theology, to really tell these people who Jesus really was, why he came to earth. So last but certainly not least is the theme. There is one central theme in 1 John if we had to limit it down, and it's this: eternal life is in Jesus Christ, and he came in the flesh. Right, so you see there, Jesus was 100% human and also 100% God. So Jesus Christ, there's eternal life in him, right? He came, died on the cross, forever defeated sin and death, and gave us his righteousness and eternal life. Another way we could phrase this is that John is talking about the assurance of salvation. The assurance of salvation, so that we are saved being children of God as long as we believe and recognize, acknowledge that Jesus came, who he was, that he was God, yet also 100% human, died for us and rose again. So 1 John is a letter of certainty, and if I had to pick out one word that John says more so than any other word in this whole letter, it's no. So it's no. It occurs 37 times in just 5 chapters. So he's really concerned about people knowing Jesus, knowing who he really was, having good theology, good orthodoxy and orthodox and orthopraxy. So that's pretty much a really quick overview. Really quick, I know it's 7:30. Let me just go over this outline real quick, and you all can watch the video when you get home. An outline for 1 John, there isn't a whole lot of consensus, but I really liked this one from Blue Letter Bible, and also the video from the Bible Project agrees with this outline as well. I think it's just a really simplistic outline. It describes the book quite nicely. So we have 4 major sections of 1 John. The first is the prologue, or the introduction, and that is the word of life. So you will see in verses 1 through 4 in chapter 1, that's going to echo John 1:1, very much so. All right. So then we go into the main section, the second main section, which is God is light. So we have God is light in section 2, and then God is love in section 3. You can see all the subcategories of that. So A, we're walking in the light, so John's going to talk about how we do that. We resist sin, we look to God who is light. Then B, we have to obey the command to love, know your spiritual status, be warned of enemies of the faith who are trying to dim that lightness, who are trying to bring darkness into the world. He's going to talk a lot about Antichrist, which is fascinating because John is the only author in all of Scripture who mentions this term, Antichrist. So we're going to talk a whole lot about what does that word mean and why did he use that word. And then E is living like children of God in the light, how we're supposed to do that. So the third main section, he's talked about light. Now he's going to talk about love. We have some really, really famous passages in this section, especially when we get to chapter 4. You will recognize chapter 4 a whole bunch. But in section A, we have love one another, part 1. So it's talking about how we are to love one another by putting love into action and living in that confidence. We're going to test the spirits, and then C is love one another, part 2. This is where we get into the really famous section of God is love, that whole chapter and that whole section. So then we skip down to the conclusion, and that's a pretty short conclusion. It's chapter 5, verses 13 through 20, 21. We're knowing that we have eternal life made possible by Jesus. He talks a lot about prayer, which I'm excited to talk about. And do not continue in sin, right? And keep yourself from idols. He's going to end the letter with this verse, and we'll talk a whole lot about that. So I'm sorry I rushed through that. Again, this video right here, I have the link for you all. It is fabulous. It's a great visual representation of what's going on in 1 John. They also talk some about 2nd and 3rd John, just a little bit. But I would highly recommend to watch that before you start reading. All right, so next week, we are going to start with questions. All right, so be sure to work on pages 6 and 7. It's 1 John chapter 1 through 1 John chapter 2, verse 2. So basically all of chapter 1 and 2 verses of chapter 2. We're going to talk a lot about life and light. Okay? And one last thing before everyone goes. So this is a 7-week study. I will be at a mandatory retreat on Wednesday, October 19th. So we will not have class that day. And we will cancel class for that one Wednesday, because I will be out of town. It is a retreat for ordination stuff, so I have to go. We will end, based on that timeline, 7 weeks. November 2nd will be our last class. So 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I know people start to travel in November, and November starts to get crazy. So we will finish way far in advance of Thanksgiving. And I think that's about it for tonight. October 19th. November 2nd. Does anyone have any questions before we depart ways?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and I look forward to diving into 1 John with you all starting next week.
Just